Hello! I was approached recently by a subscriber who is an indie game developer who, inspired by my videos, made a game. He emailed me and told me that he didn't have enough money to sponsor a video, but would really love to sponsor a video of mine, and I told him, keep your money, dude. Since you made a game inspired by my videos, I'm going to make a video inspired by your game and promote your game in it. And, well, depending on how well your game sells, you can then make a voluntary donation to my channel. The game, AlexanderBall, a Countryball Tale, is a historical strategy game. It's got battles inspired by heroes of might and magic, a grand strategy element that involves keeping the various balls in your empire happy, and like the historical figure of Alexander, you can go around burning down cities and building new ones like Alexandria. However, the most interesting element in the game is the army management system. As you conquer the world, you will get new types of balls in your empire, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Scythian balls, which make good cavalry units, and Assyrian balls, which do well as engineers and infantry. In theory, the player can have billions of combinations of units in their army as they conquer the known world. Inspired by this game, I'm making this video that you are seeing right now, and to help out our friend, because I like helping out small indie game developers, I am going to promote his game in the next few videos as well. The game has just entered early access as of the 20th of January, and it is going to get free updates every month until full release. If you would like to get more updates on the development of the game, you can join their Discord server. The game is only $9.99, and I will make a video about Imperial political legacies every single month for the next few months, and I will coincide the releases of these videos with the updates to his game. You will find the Steam link in the description and in the pinned comment. What even is empire? How do we define empire? There are many definitions of what empire and imperialism is, and all of them fall short, because not one of them has ever withstood the test of time. If you like to define empire by size and the amount of land it rules over, then the Athenian Empire was not an empire, and you may as well all bow before the Canadian Empire, which is one of the greatest empires of our time and history by the landmass definition. Is it the process of driving people off a land and taking that land for yourself? Not only is Uruguay an empire by that definition, but so are also anyone who have ever done so. Is it exploitation of labor and resources? In that case, you will run into trouble with the Spanish and Russian Empire, who were empires of economic kleptocracy. A popular modern definition is that it is a cultural bias or lie derived from a sense of Western superiority that depicts others as the other, like Oriental. By that definition, neither Imperial Japan, the Mongols, Imperial China, or the Ottomans were empires. Is it technology? The phalanx helped Alexander defeat the Achaemenid armies, but Alexander made the decision to invade the Achaemenid Empire. The phalanx did not make that decision for him. Is it political innovation and development? Do societies become empires because their political systems at some point become more advanced than others? The Mongols beg to differ. Is it divine right? Many Islamists like to justify their claim to empire by pointing at the speed of the Islamic conquests and subsequent assimilations as proof of divine sovereignty. But by that standard, the Spanish Empire and the Catholic faith, in whose name it was built, have a better claim to being the true divine sovereigns. Is it cultural prestige and advancement? French imperialism was built upon the idea of being the beacons of civilization and culture, enlightened and destined to civilizing the world. But it was French troops who burnt the Summer Palace of China, one of the worst crimes against cultural heritage in history. Is it geopolitics that creates empire? Realists like this definition. They also conveniently refuse to use the word empire, instead using the euphemism global power. Their favorite example is the Russian Empire that supposedly exists to secure itself defensively against others. But by what right is that position of empire granted to Russia? Poland, just as well, used to be the main power of that region. The problem with defining empire is that there is no definition of empire that can successfully be used to define all empires. And I would argue that this is in fact an inherent part of imperialism as a political structure. It is a political concept that refuses to define itself, thereby forcing others into defining it. It is a neat political trick of sorts, one that disguises an inherent truth of imperialism that, despite the failures of definition, still stands true across all of history's empires. Namely that all empire is illegitimate, a usurpation, and built upon inequality. My personal favorite definition of imperialism is that it is a political institution that refuses to accept limitations or boundaries to its spheres of sovereignty. But I'm not going to pretend that this definition comes without problems. It would render most religions and almost all political ideologies as inherently imperialistic. Yet I still favor this definition, because the aspect of imperialism that interests me the most is the political decisions and the institutions that it creates. To make empire is not a divine mission or a cultural drive, neither is it a technological necessity. I would argue that to make an empire is a fundamentally political decision. All empires at some point made the decision to become empires. They decided to usurp or destroy the institutions of others. The reason so many empires claim to be the heirs of the Roman Empire is because it is seen as the birthplace of an idea of empire, the idea of a universal empire, that being a sovereign sphere that transcends cultural or religious boundaries to unify different peoples as one cohesive and governed group. But even that is not true. This idea was not born in Rome, but in modern-day Iraq, at one of the very few precise dates that we have for ancient history, the 13th of June, 323 BC, the day Alexander the Great died. Alexander was far more than just a conqueror. Alexander did not force a Greek culture over those he had conquered. He did something entirely different. To go through a timeline, there are some important events that we should mark out. First, Alexander participates in his father's unification of Greece. That in itself is an imperial act, justified on creating a unity of Greeks against the Achaemenids. Alexander continues this project even after his father's death, and then proclaims the Achaemenids to be the murderers of his father and invades them as a punishment. Here's where we find the lie and myth that formed the justification for the Imperial War. There is in reality no evidence whatsoever of the Achaemenids being responsible for the death of Alexander's father. Alexander comes to Anatolia presenting himself as the liberator of the Greeks under Achaemenid rule. Here he visits a pilgrimage site that is claimed to be the tomb of the mythical figure Achilles. Alexander, through this, extends his myth behind the war. He portrays himself as a fictional hero of Greece, the successor of the great Achilles from the Iliad myth. Then he does something surprising. He marches his armies south into Egypt. He presents himself as a liberator, founds a new city known as Alexandria, and then marches straight to the edges of Egypt into the outskirts of the Libyan desert, where there is an oasis called Siva. In Siva, you will to this day find ancient ruins of the oracle of the Egyptian god Ammon. Alexander visits the oracle, which proclaims him to be a son of both Zeus and Ammon, a living god and thereby the legitimate pharaoh of Egypt. Alexander makes another political decision here that we would see repeated in many future empires, especially when empires conquered territories from other empires. Rather than portraying himself as a conqueror, Alexander portrays himself as a liberator and restorer. He did not come here as a Greek conqueror to merely take Egypt from the Achaemenids. No, he is here to restore Egypt to what it was, and to do so because he himself is Egyptian, namely a pharaoh. What we see here is a universalist claim first appearing within the political institutions of empire. No longer just a conqueror, no longer just a subjugator, no longer a king of kings, but a supposedly legitimate restorer. An empire that is not just Greek, but an empire where all are equally legitimate. After Egypt, Alexander meets Darius and his army on the fields of Gaugamela in modern-day Iraq. He defeats Darius and takes over Babylonia. He chases Darius across his empire and consolidates his rule over what was once the Achaemenid Empire. As he crosses into the Indus Valley, his soldiers and generals falter in morale, and he is forced to return to Babylonia. It is here where he begins the same process that we saw in Egypt. He marries a daughter of Darius, he visits the tomb of Cyrus the Great, he adopts Iranian customs, and he encourages his followers and generals to do the same. Assimilate. Do not force what you are upon others, but adopt from those who you have conquered. In part, become what you have conquered. Become both Iranian and Greek. Destroy what separates the Greeks and the Iranians, and thereby create an empire that crosses Occident and Orient, and through this is of all for all, a universal empire. On the 13th of June 323 BC, Alexander died, but the political institution of a universal empire that he created continued. His successors are his generals, who first argue over who inherits the body of Alexander. Chroniclers write that at his deathbed, Alexander's successors already began arguing over whose physical appearance was the most similar to him. In the end, it is Ptolemy who takes Alexander's body to Egypt, where it is mummified and buried in a tomb, thereby continuing the practice Alexander began in life. Alexander is buried as an Egyptian pharaoh and not as a Greek conqueror. The Ptolemies founded the Ptolemaic dynasty, the last of the pharaonic dynasties of Egypt. They marry Egyptians, adopt Egyptian custom and tradition, and create a mixed Egyptian-Greek culture and society. Seleucus, who inherited the lands of Iran, founded the Seleucid Empire, adopts the customs and traditions of Babylonia, and creates a mixed Iranian-Greek culture. Alexander's political institution of the Universal Empire lived on beyond him. The two most poignant symbols of this persist in myths around literature and weird rituals around tombs. It begins when Alexander visits the tomb of the fictional hero and an Iranian emperor. He created a political practice that lived through the ages among all those who sought to build empire. Julius Caesar visited Alexander's tomb after arriving in Egypt. Augustus visited Alexander's tomb after he defeated Cleopatra. Roman emperors Caligula, Septimus Severus, and Caracalla all visited Alexander's tomb. A tsunami in 356 sank the old city of Alexandria, possibly together with Alexander's tomb. Ever since, the tomb of Augustus became the site of pilgrimage for those wanting to legitimize their imperial ambitions, right up to the first Holy Roman emperors. Then, in medieval Europe, the tomb of Charlemagne became the site of pilgrimage for all the kings seeking to legitimize their own imperial ambitions, eventually creating a curious conflict between German and French monarchs over who was the true heir to Charlemagne's legacy, symbolized through the tomb of Charlemagne, even though, ironically, Charlemagne himself was probably born in modern-day Belgium, where the Franks actually came from. Even after the revolution in France, Napoleon mirrored Alexander's tomb visits when he visited the tomb of both the German ruler Frederick the Great and the tomb of the ancient conqueror Charlemagne. A century later, Hitler would visit the tomb of Napoleon, and the reason why the Allies agreed Hitler should not have a grave was to prevent any such imperial ritual reoccurring upon it. But this practice of political legitimization of imperial ambition is not just found in the West. The tomb of Suleiman lies at the borders between Turkey and Syria. Largely ignored and understudied in the West, it served the similar function of political legitimization. The Ottoman sultans continued the Alexandrian and later Roman practice of constructing and visiting tombs of those who they considered to be their greatest sultans. The emperors of Iran would continue to practice the same at the tomb of Cyrus the Great, the original tomb at which this practice began. And as far east as India, we find this practice around the tomb of the Mughal emperor Akbar the Great. The extent to which this imperial political legacy has lived on through the ages is not only reflected in visitations to tombs, but in the very accounts of the story itself. Alexander's story belongs to neither the Occidental or the Oriental world, but lives and endures as a political myth throughout both. There are Alexander tales written in Latin, Italian, French, or German, just as there are Alexander tales written in Arabic, Farsi, and Turkish. Throughout the telling of Alexander's story, he is almost never depicted as a Greek conqueror, but as a French knight, a German king, a Turkish sultan, or an emperor of Iran. From being depicted in the armor of a European warrior to being depicted as a horse lord of the Central Asian steppes. In future videos about Imperial Legacies, I would like to focus on these types of phenomenons, the institutions of empire, the political lies and myths that form their foundation, and the legacies they left behind for societies. I'll be uploading them hopefully once a month, and will add them all to the description of this video that you just watched. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to check out the game by our dear friend AlexanderBall, a Countryball Tale. And if you wish to discuss this video, don't forget to join the Discord server, and you can support this channel via Patreon or PayPal. Thank you.